Hello, everyone, and welcome to People of Interest. People of Interest is a show based on the stories from people like you and me. My hope is that as we listen to our guest stories, that we would be entertained, encouraged, and maybe even inspired. I'm your host, Miguel Guanipa, and today I have a very special guest. She is really, and I was asking her to how should I introduce because I always ask my guest, and she says something that I quite agree with. She said she loves life. She's a person that loves life. Lisa Giallonardo. Lisa, thank you so much
Thank you.
for taking the
Thank
trip
you.
over here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. So we were talking about. Does that look familiar? South Beach.
It looks really
Is that where you go
familiar.
and put the umbrella and just relax a little bit?
That is my happy place.
Yeah.
Yes.
That
Yes,
was it.
indeed.
That's what you were telling me about that. That's one of the places that makes you happy when you think about it.
Yes.
Now, why is that?
It's an interesting thing. I've been going to Martha's Vineyard since I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute I get on that ferry,
Yeah.
I feel like my cares are gone.
Mm.
The ocean air, the just the openness. It's just wonderful.
It's not funny how the ocean has
Yes.
that quality.
Yes.
You know? Like I look at the ocean also sometimes and I wonder, because it's well for one thing it's so large, so such an expanse, and so it's kind of awesome. The word awesome can be used there. I think. But I don't know, but you're supposed to be the one that's talking here. But anyway,
I find it invigorating. I
okay.
find it peaceful at the same time,
Yeah.
which I find fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what it does is it renews energy.
Mm.
That it has that calmness and yet that majesty that just gives you hope
Mm.
and ready to move on. And so when I'm there, I'll go to South Beach
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just standing and watching the ocean, or just walking the beach in the off season
Mm-hmm.
when you wouldn't necessarily want to be sitting there,
Yeah.
is wonderful. Bundle up, put on a coat and a
Yeah.
hat, and
Even in the cold.
even in oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually hope to go in a couple weeks
Oh, okay.
and just to get my fix.
So that's the time. That's the time where you refresh yourself.
Yes,
Now, you find that you need that periodically. You need a time when you need to refresh yourself.
I do. I think I I talk to people all day long,
Yeah.
and every 30 minutes somebody comes in to me complaining about pain.
Mm.
And
Oh,
so
okay.
it requires you to be really personally there
Mm-hmm.
and listening and attending to someone else's need.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that every 30 minutes for 10 hours, that's a
Mm.
lot of people.
Yeah.
And it takes an enormous amount of emotional energy. And so I like to refresh myself periodically so that I can be the best that I can be when I'm with a patient.
Because you're a physical therapist.
I am a physical
Okay, I mentioned
therapist.
that so they know what you're talking about when it's
Yes.
pain.
Hmm.
And you focus on the feet, no?
I do.
Yeah.
The majority of my patient population have foot and ankle problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I find that interesting that what you mentioned that people when people come to you usually it's because there's some pain that they're having some physical
Yes.
pain,
Yes.
and so you have to listen carefully and address that, but you can't always fix that though, right?
No, you can't.
Yeah.
And I think that the more you listen to a person,
Mm-hmm.
the more you learn about what the person needs to be able to do, wants to be able to do, and combine that with their impairments, it allows you to do the best you can to get that person back to doing what they need and or want to do.
Mm.
But you have to be, sometimes you have to tease it out.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to ask directly. It can be challenging at times. You're seeing people at their worst.
Mm. Mm.
Do you know?
Yeah. Now that's kind of a calling in a way for you, then, 'cause
40 years I've been a PT.
40 years. So you've seen a lot of people. come to you with a lot of pain.
I have indeed.
Have you have you found places where there's a direct link between the pain and something that's more emotionally based? Have there been cases like that where you come across, and how have those? If so, how has that been like?
It's interesting. I do treat the entire body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an orthopedic clinical specialist, so people come to me generally with orthopedic problems. And it's not uncommon to have somebody with neck pain, head pain, low back pain, um, and really have some emotional component that feeds into that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
patients often say to me, it's as much psychotherapy with you, Lisa, as it is physical.
Yeah.
And I think that if you listen, then you give them the opportunity to vent some of that,
Mm.
and to even just to feel better. That's not my forte,
Mm-hmm.
but I can listen.
Is that part of your loving life that you want to help people feel
Yes,
better?
yes.
Well, then let's talk a little bit about, then go back a little bit when you were growing up then. See if we can find a place down there where maybe you began to sense that calling, that would be something that you like to do. Do you remember a time like that? Or
It's very interesting. My my mother was an operating room nurse,
mm.
and my father, despite his education as a commercial artist, was a hospital administrator, all because of World War II
Mm.
and coming back and not being able to find work as an artist. And so
Hmm.
my mother's best friend was a single woman who was a physical therapist, one of the original physical therapists.
Mm.
She was an army trained physical therapist treating polio patients.
Mm.
And so
Hmm.
that's really first how I learned about physical therapy. I was very athletic. I played varsity sports in high school, the beginning of college. And so I was always very physically active and
Mm.
interested. When I was a junior in high school, my father said to me, one of the aide in the physical therapy department is going away for a month. And I told them you'd come in and just volunteer, but it'd give you a good experience.
Yeah.
So I did.
How old were you then?
I must have been maybe 16 or 17. No more
Oh.
than 17, probably 16.
Yeah.
And I spent a month in a physical therapy department as an aide. And the director made it his goal to convince me to go to physical therapy school and to go to Northeastern to do that.
Yeah. Specifically.
And he succeeded.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, it was really, and that's really what I knew. I thought, this really suits me.
Mm.
It's physically active, it's interesting, it's a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think, it makes you have to take a lot of information and melt it together to
Mm-hmm.
come up with the reason behind pain,
Mm-hmm.
the reason behind dysfunction. And that's a lot of fun. It's a
Mm.
lot of fun.
So how do you find yourself smiling so often?
I know.
Where's that,
I do love
where does
life.
that come from?
My dad
Yeah.
was someone who truly loved life.
Oh, okay.
And we would go to art museums, and he loved musical theater.
Mm.
And we went to a lot of shows. He loved the opera. And every Saturday, live from the Met was on the radio, was on the classical music station on the radio. And his dad,
Hmm.
when he first came to this country from Italy, had seen Caruso sing
Oh
at the
my
Opera
goodness.
House in Boston, which is now a dorm for
Caruso
Northeastern.
sang in Boston.
Yes, at the Boston Opera House,
Okay.
1906.
Yeah.
And so he had developed that love from my grandfather, and we used to sit on Saturday afternoons and listen to the opera. we'd go to ball games together. He loved baseball, loved baseball,
Mm-hmm.
and we spent a lot of time at Fenway Park together, and just a lifelong love of baseball, and he just showed me by example that there's so much out there,
Mm.
that it's there for the taking if you're interested and willing to find new things and learn new things and meet different people and be open and not judgmental. Um,
Mm.
and that's been a great life lesson for me.
Do you pass that on to your children,
I
or
do.
tried?
I did try. You know, I think about it, and I, as the mother of boys, um, it's been really fun to watch them grow and to think about, what do I really respect in my husband as a man, as a father, and so little things like I taught them to cook,
Mm-hmm.
I taught them to clean the house, to do their own laundry, just made them responsible for themselves and not depend upon anybody or expect anybody to do things for them. Not in a cruel way, but
Mm-hmm.
in a way that really is respectful
Mm-hmm.
to themselves and to others. And they are that way.
Yeah.
Different, very different. They have different. They're as different as two people could be.
Yeah.
But um, it's nice to see those features from us that
Mm.
they've gained. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, um, when I was listening to you, I was wondering. I'm looking at you, and you're very happy, and you seem to. You say you like to explore a lot of different things, and I was thinking. I guess my mind sometimes thinks around things, and I was wondering, was there ever a place somewhere where you were not like that?
Yes. One of my positions
Mm.
um, in academia, I spent half of my career in academia. And one of the positions I took, um, I worked with a group of people who really weren't happy people.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm.
and so even though you can try and you can be yourself and you can try to affect how other people are behaving, you
Mm-hmm.
can only do so much. You can only be responsible for your behavior, not someone else's.
Yeah.
And during that time, to, I don't know, to mitigate that, I don't know if I would call it unhappiness. That's probably a little melodramatic,
That vibe.
that vibe,
Yeah.
I got myself involved in the most amazing project in our national headquarters. And I chaired a committee, a national committee of orthopedic physical therapists, and the 8 of us wrote guidelines for orthopedic physical therapy practice
Mm-hmm.
for the entire country.
Mm.
It was the first time they were ever written. We met every 5 or 6 weeks in Alexandria, Virginia, and it was the most professionally fulfilling thing I ever did in my life
Mm.
because I chaired a group of people who loved the field, who loved practice, who were interested, who really were of similar kind of a mindset where excellence is the bottom line and we move up from there,
Mm-hmm.
but not in an
Hmm.
arrogant way,
Yeah.
in a way that's curious
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
and never afraid to ask somebody,
Mm-hmm.
always reading, always listening, accepting advice, not being so self-centered that or arrogant that you think you know it all.
Mm.
And this group of people um, came together,
Mm.
and and it was just stunning
Mm.
how exciting that was. And then I was fortunate enough to travel around the country and spend long weekends teaching different groups of people all over the United States about these practice guidelines.
Yeah.
And, when I think about that, I realize that it was an enormous time commitment. It took me away from some of the things that I like to do outside of work. It took me away from my family. But it gave me that joy that I didn't feel at the job. And so it was a lovely balance for me at that
You
time.
didn't feel at the job a joy that you didn't feel at the job. You said.
In the academic setting where the
Oh,
people
okay.
weren't
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
as friendly, and so it was a lovely opportunity that had I not gone to that setting, I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
So see, it all worked out.
It all works out. In
It,
the
it
end, it
all
works
worked out because I was open to taking a chance,
Yeah.
and it paid off in a
Well,
big way.
that's good because you did mention earlier that the phrase "carpe diem." So define that for the. I'll let you define that for the audience, and then talk to me a little about how that applies to your life. I mean, seize the day, but
It is seize the day.
Yeah.
It is make the most out of every day,
yeah,
and in a way that is not idealistic. Every day's not going to be fabulous, but if you connect with one or two people, if you can make a change in somebody's life, if you can bring joy to your own, that's a wonderful thing, and it should be done every day. Some
Okay.
piece of it should be done every day.
So tell me again what you just said. You just said if you can, you begin, and you say if you can
If
do
you can
something
affect a
new,
change
affect a change
in someone else,
in someone else.
if you learn something new, do
Yeah.
something new, do
Okay.
something that brings you joy,
Right.
brings someone else joy.
Okay.
Every day, it doesn't have to be very big.
Okay. When do you feel that you began to take a good grip on that and saying this is the way I want to pursue existence?
It's funny. I've always been pretty much like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my dad was very. If you knew my dad, you knew me. We're very similar people, and he just could not bring himself to retire. He loved the people around. He felt like retirement would make him isolated, but he knew he wanted to paint, and he knew he wanted to travel to Italy, and he knew he wanted to do some things. So finally, at age 75, he decided he would retire. And 3 months later, he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia.
Oh.
And 3 years later, he died. Never fulfilling any, not one, of those things that he had put off for himself. He was a man who smiled at everybody. He treated everybody the same. He would always say, as a hospital administrator, if I treat the custodial staff any different than I treat the physician, then the physician can't do his job. And that everybody has a role to play. And you have to always keep that in mind. People really loved this man because he loved them. But he never really did a lot of things that he wanted to do for himself that brought him joy because he kept putting it off. I'll do it when I retire. And he never got to do that. And I think that when I realized that that was going to be the case, and we were very blessed. We kept him at home, and he died at home. And it was a family affair. All of us contributed to his care, especially my mother. But it was a good lesson. Don't put anything off. Do what you can. Really get as much out of life every single day, because if you put everything off, it may never be able to maybe never able to achieve it, or experience it, or enjoy it, or share it with someone else.
Seize the day.
Seize the day, man. Seize the day. I have a rock, a little stone on my desk. It says Carpe Diem on it, and it just
Yeah.
reminds me that it's okay. Just one thing a day.
Well, tell me some of the places that you see on that little
I know,
bracelet that you. There's several significance to
there are.
them,
So
correct?
there is an artist who actually passed away a couple years ago, Cheryl Stark.
Mm-hmm.
She's a jeweler and an artisan, and about 10 years ago, I think, she started making beads when these beaded bracelets became popular, and she made beads that were specific to Martha's Vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
She designed them, she casted them, and then sold them in her store, CB Stark. And what's lovely is that there's a lobster, there's seashells, there's entering Edgartown, there's the Edgartown Lighthouse, which ironically is where my son and his wife got engaged.
Oh, okay.
There's the Flying Horses in Oak Bluffs, the ferry, which is how I get there, the Black Dog, and and wampum.
So each bead has a significant.
Each bead has a significance. The glass beads she designed for each town on the vineyard, and I wear it every day because it is truly my happy place.
Yeah.
And so when I'm starting to feel like I'm tired, I, I'm not sure I can, put energy that I need to put into this next patient who's maybe difficult or challenging in some way. Then I just
Yeah.
I start twisting my bracelet and looking at those places that really make me happy.
Mm.
It's a wonderful contemplative way to recenter yourself and move on. Even when it's busy, I can be in our lunchroom. There can be 10 of us in the lunchroom.
Yeah.
And I can just move this around and
Yeah.
immediately it gives me what I need.
Yeah, let's go back at some foundations then. Let's think about. You like to read.
I love to read.
So what are you reading lately? What do you like to read the most actually when you read? What are the things that you go to usually, more often than not?
I love really good writing.
Yeah.
And I love compelling characters. Very early in my career, I treated a publisher from a very prominent Boston publishing house.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, so how do you decide? Like, how do you decide what books you're going to publish?
Mm-hmm.
There must be 1 million books to publish. And she said, well, we look for good writing, and we look for interesting characters, and a good story.
Mm-hmm.
She said, so it has to have one of those things. She said, but we hit the jackpot when all three of those things come together.
Mm.
She said, those are the books that remain in you for years and years and years. And I absolutely love when I fall upon that book.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's famous, and sometimes it's very early. I go to a lot of author talks, so it's fun to listen to authors and hear how they come up with how they come up with their story.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, Amor Towles is an author who actually grew up in Metro West Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote the book called A Gentleman in Moscow. And it's still on the New York Times bestseller list. Mm-hmm. I saw Amor Towles at Wellesley Books the week the book came out. He was a financier who loved to write and wrote his first novel, Rules of Civility. And it was enough of a success that it encouraged him to write a second book. But he wasn't a famous guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was successful, but not New York Times bestseller successful the way that the new one was.
Yeah.
So he came in, he sat down, he said, every year I went to a hotel, a beautiful old hotel in Switzerland. And every year I would see the same people in the hotel. These, you know, people year after year who worked there, who were the concierge and the doorman and the, you know, the people who ran the restaurant, and some of the people, he said, even lived there. And I would see these people year after year, and he thought, I would love to write a story about that.
Hmm.
And he was very interested in Russian history. And so he wrote this story about a gentleman who was under house arrest in the Hotel Metropole in Moscow. And it was the beginning of the Bolshevik Revolution. And so this count was essentially an enemy of this new state because he was aristocracy and they wanted nothing to do with aristocracy.
Yeah.
And so he had written something very profound that was well respected in the entire country. So they decided that unlike most of the aristocracy, they wouldn't put him to death because he had written this piece. So they put him under house arrest at this hotel. And he lived out 40 years in this hotel. And this story, a gentleman from Moscow, takes place in one, essentially, in one building over the course of 40 years. And it is one of the most compelling,
Wow.
incredibly well written, interesting books that I've ever read, and it will stay with me forever.
So that's a book I was going to ask you. If you have a book that has stayed with
So,
you, and that
so,
will be.
so there's a really good example.
Yeah.
I read the book. I actually got a book from him. He signed it,
Oh.
and
nice.
no one had heard about the book.
Yeah.
So I had read the book and started talking to the people in my book group and saying, we need to read this book. This is a really special book.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, it showed up in the New York Times book review. And then it, you know, it hit the ceiling from there.
Yeah.
It was really very nice.
So if Christine wants a book recommendation, then I'll send it to you. Then.
That would, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a
But
friend
she's
who calls
always-
me. I'm in Barnes & Noble.
She's always looking for a good book. And you also like to cook.
I love to cook.
That's something that your parents taught you, or you
So
developed that?
so my parents are both from Italy.
Yeah.
My mother's family is Bolognese, so from the north of Italy, in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy. And my father's family is Abruzzese, so they're from Abruzzi in the center, eastern part of Italy, in the mountain ranges, essentially. The Giallonardos were stonemasons, and they, as in anywhere in the world, different parts of a country have different foods, depending upon what's fresh and what's available. And my mother's family, the northern Italians, were more prosperous. The south of Italy didn't become part of Italy really until the late 1800s. It really wasn't one country. And really started the migration of Italians to the United States, into Boston, into New York, into Chicago, because the poverty level in the south of Italy was so extreme. The Italian government gave everybody visas who wanted it. But anyway, but my mother's family from the north, they were well educated. Bologna has one of the oldest universities in the world and the oldest medical school in the world. And their food was very different. Their food was very their sauce their pasta sauce was very thick with meat.
Mm-hmm.
You almost didn't. You knew it was tomato, but it wasn't intuitively obvious.
Mm-hmm.
It was very wholesome, but it was very rich.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were in the city, there wasn't a lot of farmland. They ate a lot of risotto. They ate a lot of polenta, and the pasta, the tagliatelle with the bolognese. A lot of chicken,
Mm-hmm.
um, not a lot of beef.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you were really very wealthy, but certainly some. Now, in my father's family, in Abruzzi, there was more opportunity for farming, so it was much fresher. Everything was lighter. Um, my grandfather had a 3-acre farm
Mm-hmm.
for most of his life, and I used to, you know, harvest with him and cook with him. Um,
Hmm.
so it was always an interest. It was always an interest of mine,
Mm.
and when I was newly married, and I was in graduate school, one of my neighbors saw me outside one day, and she said to me, "I want you to come and take one of my cooking classes." And it turned out that Denise Shore was a cordon bleu trained French expat who had been a resistance fighter, a French resistance fighter. She
Yeah.
was a French Jew, and she was a teenager during World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and married an American GI,
Mm.
and moved to the Boston area. And in a group of French expats, she met Julia Child, and they started talking,
Yeah.
and they talked about how they could teach American women to cook, because they lamented that American women cooked all these horrible things, and they could help them. And of
Yeah.
course, Julia went on to her television career, and Denise started teaching cooking classes and writing,
And you went to one of the classes.
and I not only went to one of
You
her
went to more than
classes, I took her entire course, which was a series of 10, um, 10 courses that made up the entire certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me. I finished graduate school. I told her when I finished my thesis, I would go. I would
Yeah.
take it, and I went 2 nights a week for 4 years.
Wow.
And the month before I delivered
Wow.
my older son, I graduated with a certificate in French cooking.
Wow.
And it was that funny. It's a
we're
long
gonna
time ago.
we're gonna have to take you up for that invitation to come over then.
I know it'd be fun.
What would you like to? You said you love to teach.
I do
What
love
would
to
be
teach.
your ideal thing to be teaching?
I do love teaching clinical decision making.
Clinical decision making.
I like teaching how to put a puzzle together. When I taught in the university, I taught a very case study based approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I would give them some information, and then I'd walk around the room and ask questions to try to help them to see the big picture.
Mm.
Try to pull all those pieces together and understand how you get from point A to point B to point C, and then how you manage the patient.
Mm.
And that is a lot of fun. It's very energizing, because if you ask the right questions,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you're teaching, if you engage the audience, it's the most exciting part of teaching. Engaging the audience and getting them really in the whole thing with you.
Mm.
I don't like to stand up and just lecture.
Yeah.
I think it's more fun if they're invested in it with you,
Mm-hmm.
and if they really can follow where you're trying to take them. And if you watching and you're listening, you're able to ask the right questions and maybe bring them down a road they might not have thought of themselves.
Hmm. Did you use that in your parenting when your kids were young? Do you remember? Or?
I did a lot, and
Yeah.
my boys just cringe. My 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 older son in high school, they each had to do every year. They had to do a chapel speech in front of their class,
Mm-hmm.
and their class was about 35 or 40. I felt very strongly that being able to speak publicly without
Hmm.
being totally anxiety ridden was a skill that they both had to have. Whether they were shy, whether they were outgoing, it didn't make any difference. They
Hmm.
needed to be able to express themselves and not be fearful of doing that in front of a group of people.
Hmm.
And so, ironically, in high school, at junior high and high school, 7 through 12, they had to do that every year. And in their senior year, they had to talk in front of the whole school and whatever parents were invited. And my older son, the topic of his chapel speech was dinner in the Prince household. My husband's last name is Prince,
Yeah.
and and we always had dinner together, always.
Hmm.
We worked around their athletic schedules. We made ourselves available, and
Hmm.
6 nights a week at least, if not 7, we had dinner together. That was a huge value, and it
Hmm.
wasn't just having dinner; it was having dinner and talking.
Yeah.
And talking about their day and talking about what was happening in the world
Hmm.
and and talking about family and talking about all sorts of different things. But in
Hmm.
his chapel speech, he said that he was sad to miss that now. That
Hmm.
it used to make him cringe when I brought up things he didn't really want to hear about or talk about. Um,
Hmm.
but that now, with
Hmm.
him gone, the dynamics were going to change.
Hmm.
And it was going to be sad. And I think back to that. I remember being in the audience and silently crying, which is
Hmm.
not easy. I'm not much of a crier,
Yeah.
but realizing that really discussing things,
Yeah.
really asking questions and listening to the answers, and then asking another question based on their answer was a great parenting technique
Hmm.
because they know that I will always listen to them
Hmm.
and actively listen to them, not just
Mm-hmm.
pretend I'm listening. And there was no television. I would pick them up from school. There was no radio. Each one would tell me what they did during the day.
Hmm. So it's a good thing they didn't have cell phones.
They just, I don't think they had, I think maybe 10th and 12th grade they shared a cell phone.
Hmm.
So I knew when they were done sporting practice. So they really didn't. You're right. It was a different
Oh
time.
my goodness.
They're only 30 and 32,
Hmm.
but it was enough of a difference.
And they have children now?
My older son has 2 little girls,
Okay.
actually, 2 and 4. So that's really
So
fun.
hopefully maybe he will continue that tradition of
I,
sitting at dinner and
I hope so. I
yeah.
think so.
Because dinner now is like you're sitting there with your phone and I'm sitting here with my phone.
Yeah, no, not in my house.
that's
No.
that's interesting that you mentioned that Christine read a book about that, about how the dinners are so important for family growing.
It bonds you as a family.
Yeah.
It's a safe place.
Mm.
It's a constant.
Mm-hmm.
And it teaches a lot of value, a lot of personal value, a lot of family values. Um, it makes you think if you really talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really, and we don't all agree. I mean, that's what the focus
Mm-hmm.
is really to express
Mm-hmm.
each other's thoughts and understand them and it was a good way to parent, I think.
Did you like psychology at all, or
Um,
is that something that you enjoyed at all, like studying, or?
a little bit. I
Yeah.
will tell you that I had one sibling, and my sibling was bipolar,
Hmm.
and from a very, 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 very young age,
Hmm.
probably 2 or 3, there was something different and disruptive
Hmm.
about him, and so I have a cousin actually whose sibling is bipolar, and she went to medical school to become a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
That was stimulated by the fact that her father and her sister were bipolar.
Yeah.
I think I just went the other way.
Hmm.
I think I preferred something more concrete,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is why orthopedic physical therapy appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very concrete. It's very mechanical,
Yeah.
very biomechanical. You can touch it. You can feel it. You can affect a change.
Yeah. And yet you still have to play a little bit of a
You
therapist
do in a different way.
in a different way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So while I think it probably does interest me,
Mm.
in a only in a way in which I can help the patient get better.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Well, yeah. People come to you with pain, and you're just trying to relieve that pain. And sometimes if there's a little tie, that's even a psychological tie.
Mhm.
Maybe if you can spot that, I suppose.
Yes. Yes.
So, well, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of interest that you have. You also like the opera.
Me too.
Now, let me ask you. Trying to think of how much time we have. Well, tell me about a person in your life. I probably know already who it is, but because you talked about that person already. But it's a person that has been very influential in your life, and you say, without this person, I would not be who I am. Who
Well,
would that person
oh,
be?
clearly, I think my dad. I always tell my students. I have doctoral students with me regularly.
Mm-hmm.
It's unusual for me. Generally, a couple months out of the year, I don't have a student with me that I'm doing training with in the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell my students, find a mentor.
Mm.
And I had mentors along my professional path that brought me where I am today. And my dad was my first mentor.
Mm.
Sometimes professionally,
Mm.
and sometimes, personally, and sometimes just through who he was.
Mm.
And maybe didn't know that at the time so much, but certainly as I grew and developed and had my own family, I realized what it was that I received from him that made me who I am. I remember speaking to him. My boys were small and they were in Montessori, and we were having a bit of a disagreement with. There were several parents who were a little upset with how the school was being run, and
Mm-hmm.
one night one of the parents said, I want you to all come to my house. So 6 of us, 6 couples, went to this woman's house, and she said, we can do this better. We can start our own Montessori school.
Mm.
I remember going home and calling my father and saying, is this a crazy idea?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, do your due diligence. Who's in the group? Do you trust them? Do you have the talent you need? Is there somebody who's going to provide you with the money? Do you have a philosophy in mind?
Hmm.
Do you have a place where you want it to be?
Hmm.
And it was really interesting. I remember him asking me these questions, and a year later, these 6 couples, of which my husband and I are one couple, opened the Summit Montessori School in Framingham. And that was 26, 27 years ago.
Mm.
And it's still happily running and thriving today.
Hmm.
But and again, I'm a physical therapist. I'm an academic administrator.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I did as part of my career in the university in the Department of Physical Therapy. But I had the skills in academic administration that gave me something to do in this venture. And listening to my dad say to me, take a chance. If everything is in the right place, you'll be successful. If you trust the people around you, if you have the information, give it a try.
So you did your due diligence.
Yes.
After you did your due diligence and you found out all those facts, all those numbers, all the logistics, if you want to use a fancy. Well, I wanted to use that word because I like using fancy words. Was there one thing that remained that was still probably holding you back, that if you had listened to it, it wouldn't have happened?
I think we were fearful, some of us more than others, that because we weren't educators of small children with a specialty in Montessori education, we were parents whose children benefited from this pedagogy, but we weren't professionals. There was that reticence. Can we really do this? Who are we to do this? But I would go to him and I would say, okay, we have this couple who can do this, and my husband, who's an engineer, he was responsible for finding the physical plant, for overseeing any construction. This was his skill set.
Yeah.
We had a couple who were the philanthropists, who essentially gave us the seed money to start the school. We had somebody else who did marketing for profession. I mean, we had an HR person, an accountant, just ironically. And so when I sat down with him and showed him this, he looked at me and he said, "This is your time."
So everything seemed to have fallen into place.
Yes.
And you just need to take.
You just need to take that step, and it's so proud to drive by that school today, and to realize that we were part of it.
Yeah.
And now not only did our children benefit from it, but now still many others do, and
That's great.
yeah, it's lovely. It's in a beautiful old.
You talk to any of
home.
those people still? You hang out with them? Wow.
Yes. Yes, it's very nice. It's very satisfying to see this beautiful, beautiful home building in Framingham on Pleasant Street, and to realize that every time you drive by that's there because of your efforts.
You had a part in that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What about a time when another decision you had to take that was one of those somewhat monumental decisions, and you jumped, and then it turned out, oops, this didn't work out, and you can laugh about it now. But
I know. It's funny.
and what did you learn from that? Also, by the way,
I decided, maybe foolhardily, to start a doctoral program in organizational behavior while I was a program director of a physical therapy program. And I was able to do it financially because I had tuition remission. But it meant that I worked full-time. I went to school 3/4 time. And I had children and a husband and parents, and and I worked very hard. I love organizational behavior. I think it's fascinating. Talk about psychology. In many respects, it is, but it's really very very interesting to me. And I did a lot of work on organizational culture, and how that really affects individuals as well as the group and the product, whatever that product might be. Um, as I completed the coursework and was starting to write the proposal to write my dissertation, my mother-in-law got sick. Then my father-in-law got sick, and then my father got sick. So here I was with, a full-time job, a three-quarter time educational direction, two children, a husband, and now three parent figures who were ill and needed more than they would normally have needed. And I remember sitting in a classroom and before class in a building that was, pretty fairly empty because we were kind of in between the day students and the evening students. And it was a proposal writing class, and it was going to be my time where I was going to talk to the class about what I was proposing to do for my dissertation. And I was sitting in this empty classroom, and I had a full-blown panic attack. I didn't know what was happening to me. And it was quite an experience, thinking that you were going to die of a heart attack in a classroom by yourself.
Before you give a presentation. Yeah.
And
Oh my goodness.
a classmate of mine came in, a colleague actually as well, and I told her that I don't know what was wrong, and she said to me, Lisa, this is a sign. And I took a leave of absence. And 7 years later, when everything calmed down, I didn't go back. And there's a part of me that regrets that. It was certainly a goal of mine to get my doctorate, but you can't take the educational piece away.
Yeah.
I learned an enormous amount, and I use it all the time. But that was an interesting decision, and I've always been a high energy person, so to do multiple things was not frightening to me. But at some point, it's too much, and there was a good example of it.
It's in the past now, and maybe in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, time has flown by. We're almost done.
Wow.
But I always love my guests to give them an opportunity to speak into the camera to whoever, whenever somebody may stumble upon this. I'm sure they already have gotten a lot just from listening to you, but you have an opportunity to think about something that if this was, let's say this was the last lecture that you were going to, have you ever heard of that, the last lecture?
I read the last lecture.
Okay, this is the
Yes.
last little piece of advice that you're going to give to the world. And here's your opportunity, and just, you can go ahead and share it, and then we can close.
My lasting piece
camera
of
with the red.
advice is that treat every day like it was your last. Get something out of every day, whether it's an interaction with a person, whether it's a wonderful piece of literature, whether it's admiring a painting, whether it's cooking a delicious meal or drinking a beautiful glass of wine. There's never enough time to eat good food and drink good wine and see amazing art and read incredible literature and listen to beautiful music. And I always believe that if you waste a moment of that time, that you'll be filled with regret. And my whole My whole focus in life is to have no regrets.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And you could have also mentioned and meet wonderful person.
And me, wonderful.
And
Yes,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Lisa, so much. Thank
It
you for
was
coming.
my
It was a
pleasure.
pleasure. I hope you had a good time.
I did.
And I thank all of you out there for watching. And we'll see you next time when the next person comes and shares their story.